All right, this is the starter that lives in my refrigerator that I make my daily batch starter with every day. So looks pretty good. It's got a nice texture. Sometimes when you pull this out and it's been 3 or 4 days or 3 weeks before you used it, it'll have a layer of water on it. That water's called hooch. Stir it back in, just keep using it as long as it's got that nice kind of biting smell, it's just fine. So what I do then is I take, well actually I just take a pile of starter, put it in my little dish, and then from there, this goes back in the fridge. I'm feeding this one to get it active for tomorrow's batch. Sometimes I start in the morning and use it by the night, and that's fine too. This will be ready by tomorrow morning. If it starts showing me hooch, water, like it's already used all of its flour, I just add a little more flour and get it ready for a couple hours later use. So, there's my whole wheat flour I add, about a tablespoon of it. And then I add about equal amounts of water, maybe a little more. Just looking for a nice gooey consistency. So now I'm feeding that little bit of starter that I had from the refrigerator, like mega feed, so that it gets nice and full and fat. And really within 6 to 8 hours it's ready to use. And you just start looking for it changing in its volume. I don't get that beautiful bubbly stuff you'll see on the internet. Wish I did, but I don't. But I do notice that it does swell up a little bit, and again, it's the float test that I go for. As soon as it's going to float in a glass of water, it's ready for me to use. I put a loose lid on it, put it somewhere somewhat warm, and check on it a few times through the day, and then use it when I'm ready for bread making. With this guy, if I'm starting to get low or if it's getting real hoochy, I just feed it again. And same thing here. About a tablespoon of flour. I use a nice organic whole wheat flour, local granary here. And then just a little water so it's not too stiff. And now this guy's been fed, so he's gonna do fine. He's gonna sit in the fridge and just be happy until I pull on it some more, or until I just remember to feed it if I don't get around to it in a couple days. You don't have to feed it every day. And again, if you forget about making bread and it sits in your fridge for a long time, it's okay too. It doesn't die. You just have to feed it. Stir that water back in and keep using it. Okay, so now this guy's ready to go back in the fridge. Just wait to be used. Okay, here is my starter for my next batch, and you can see it's got a little bit of bubble. It has volume, it doubled in volume a little bit. That's what you're looking for, is that increase in volume. But the way I test it, and I will use it if it passes this test, is I put just a bit in water. And if it floats, which I don't know if you can see that, it's floating beautifully, it's ready to go. Okay? So, I'll just take my container that I just emptied out this morning, and I start with, because I'm doing 3 batches, we'll reduce the recipe, it's way too much. I use 6 cups of flour and about 4 teaspoons of salt, so it's a nice salty meal. So because I'm using 6 cups, I'm going to use 3 cups of water. So it's a 1-to-2 ratio volume-wise. Weight-wise, it's completely different, but I don't scale mine out. I just measure them with the cup. So I'm using 3 cups of water. So 1 cup to 2 cups is basically my ratio by just volume. If I were to weigh it, it'd be completely different. All right, I just put in all of my starter. And it's got a nice float sitting on top of the water. That's just lovely. Okay, I get a little water out of there and get everything. Because this is today's batch. That's it. I wash this up and then I'll start a new one tomorrow. Stir it up a little bit, just because it looks cool. And then slowly add my flour. Got a little bit of starter on my spoon. We'll use all of that. It's easier to add the flour to the water because it just mixes up a little easier in the corners. You don't get that flour sitting around there. So we just get a lumpy goo of dough to start. And then we will just do that no knead technique. And we just stretch our dough after a rest of half hour, hour. It doesn't really, you know, you do it, they say every half hour or so, but gosh, I'll be 3 or 4 hours before I get back to it sometimes. So this stuff is very forgiving. That's why I can do it. Okay, so this is 3 cups water, 6 cups flour. I used a mixture of artisan white flour from Bob's Mill with his organic white flour. You can use any kind of flour. I got a bunch of Arthur's organic flour at grocery outlet. It was wonderful. Used it a lot. I do like that artisan though. It's just kind of a nice flour to start with. It helps the beginner. So I tend to use that a lot. You gotta just keep your eye out. You'll pay $7, $8, $9, $10 a bag for it. I think a 5-pound bag. Okay. That looks pretty darn good. It's a little dry, so what I like to do after this is get a container of water. Just use my hand to do the final knead. And by keeping your fingers wet, it doesn't stick. Okay, so a nice, lovely, ragged dough is what you end up with. Then put the lid on it. And kind of mark when I'm doing my dough. The dough that's going in the oven today is Saturday. Or is it Sunday? Today's Sunday. I made the dough on Tuesday. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. 5 days resting is great. That's what I like to give it. 3-4 days. And then I always have 2 or 3 batches in the fridge while I'm baking the new stuff. Okay. All right, let's look at this dough, see if it's ready for a stretch. It's been probably half an hour. Have some water available for your fingers just so the dough doesn't get sticky all over your hand. You're lifting it up. Oh yeah, you can just tell the dough's really just softer and more willing to move around. So I just take each corner, just kind of give it a little stretch so that it can start really moving those, whatever it does to the flour and the proteins and all that stuff that the yeast is helping happen. Okay, that is my first turn. So the dough's still nice and, you know, tough. Not really got a lot of stretch in it yet. but it's starting. It's thinking about it. Another half hour, hour, I'll come back and do it again. Okay, getting ready for our second bowl. Wash your hands. Get your fingers wet. And yeah, you can tell there's just a little bit more elasticity in that loaf. A little more stretch. So I just twist them. Now, some recipes say just do it twice, stick it in the refrigerator, leave it for a couple days and you're done. I like to do it 3 times before I bring them out. Let it get a little more stretchy on my third try. But if you want to put it in the fridge at this point, I put a label on it so I know what day I've done it, or maybe what my recipe is, what flours I've used, and it's good to go. You will notice once it's done, it's no longer this kind of dough, but it's that beautiful bubbly dough we looked at when we first started this batch. So that's it. Okay, I just wanted to show you what it would look like then once it sits in the fridge for 4 or 5 days. You get that nice honeycomb look, ready for that dough to come out and be broken into loaves. Okay, I flour my workspace a little bit. And here's my dough in a container that's been in the fridge for about 4 or 5 days. Looks good. Ready to pull it apart. So I'm just going to dump it onto my dusted board. Work it out a little bit. This has been in there for, I don't know, 4 or 5 days. Probably a little longer than it should have been because I just didn't get to it. But it looks great. A little extra dough on the bottom. I just scrape it out. Okay, then I've just got little salad bowls that I put my wax paper in, or my parchment paper. I use my parchment paper twice, so this has already gone through once in my cast iron skillets. So then I just split my dough. A nice little thrift store scale. And I just try to eyeball it into thirds. Try to get the same weight on each one. Okay, this one's got just a bit more than this one. Perfect. All right, and then I take each dough. If I need a little more flour. And I just kind of shape it. Fold it in on itself without beating it up too bad. And then I drop it in its little dish. Tried it without parchment paper, but it's really a little more messy. I don't like it. So this is where a lot of people will put it in the, I don't know what that thing's called, the boule or whatever, the bowl with the rice, and with the rice flour or flour, and let it get that nice pattern in the bottom. I don't. I just do my loaf, put it in its bowl, and then it gets to sit on the counter for a few hours. And get ready for the oven. So, I have my 3 bowls. Depending on what the day looks like, I'll put a little mist on it. Then I just cover it until you get that bounce back that you want to get before it's ready for the oven. And you prod it like that. Okay, so I won't cut the bread or put the slice in it for the ear, you know, that pretty way the loaf will split, until it's ready to go in the oven. So it's going to sit here for an hour, 2 hours, as long as I want, till I can get to the oven and bake it. For my bread, I like to use Bob's all-purpose organic flour. I use about 2 cups of this, and I use about 4 cups of the artisan bread flour. So I make a 6-cup batch, which gives me 3 little loaves in my cast iron pots. I have these beautiful little cast iron skillets, or Dutch ovens. They're Kopko from Denmark. They're 3 different colors. I have red, blue, and yellow. But anyway, they're easy to use. I do keep a little bit of cornmeal at the bottom that I put my roll or my dough on, and it keeps it from burning. A little better than if I didn't have it in there. So every 6 cups of flour that I use, I get 3 Dutch oven rolls or loaves of bread out of it. Okay, my dough has been sitting for, I don't know, an hour. And if you look at it, you poke it, it doesn't come back real fast. So I'm going to get a little water. Well, that one does, but it shows the mark. Kind of keeps it there for a little while. Doesn't come back too fast. And you can kind of tell by looking at the dough. It seems a little warm, room temperature, a little soft. So I think it's about ready for me to go. So what I do with it, I have my little cutter. It's got a name. My razor is what I use to score the top of my bread so it has a nice ear when it raises. And you just kind of go in at a little bit of an angle, 45 degrees. Put whatever line you want on there. Okay. I have my oven preheating right now at 450 degrees. Now, a lot of people say put in your cast iron skillets into the oven to preheat. I did that. To me, it just took a lot of extra energy, and you're dealing with really hot pots. Didn't notice that much of a difference, so I don't do that. I probably bake a little longer, but I don't like preheating my pots to 450, 500 degrees before I have anything in there. Okay, I've scored my loaves. I spray it. I just have a little mister. Put a little mist on my bread, just so you get that beautiful bubbly texture. And then I take my skillet. So make sure you can see this. Make sure my cornmeal is nice and flat there at the bottom. Then I just lift it in, and that's it. I put the lid on it now. Once my oven is ready, I stick them in there for 40 minutes. Take the lid off, bake it another 20, and that's it. So that cornmeal looks fine. Put that in. These handles are easy to pull off. Grab a hold when you're in the oven. When you're dealing with 450 degrees, you can get your mitt on it real easily. Get it lifted. I never mix my colors. I always put the yellow with the yellow, red with the red. whatever that means about me. I don't know, but that's the way I do it. Okay. All right, my oven's preheated. I've put 3 of my kettles in there. And now it's at 450. I'm gonna set my timer for 40 minutes. So my 40 minutes is about up. So I'm gonna come in here. It's hot, so be careful. Take the lid off my Dutch oven. You can see I got a beautiful loaf in there, a beautiful ear coming up, but it's not brown enough. So now I'm taking the lids out and then 20 more minutes in the oven. All right, so here are my loaves cooling outside. They look good. They've got a nice hollow sound, good looking ear, nice texture. We'll let them cool a bit, give them a cut, see how the crumb is. Okay, here's our bread. It's mostly cooled. You guys want to let your bread cool before you cut it. Let me find my knife. It's a nice serrated bread knife to work with this. And when it's fresh like this, it's very crunchy. So let's take a cut in here. And look at that crumb. Oh yeah, I think that looks just great. It's got a nice bounce. It's got moisture. Once it cools, it'll dry out just a little bit, but that just looks great. Real happy with it. Okay, that is it, guys. Thanks.